Welcome back to the 10th edition of The American's Guide to George Balašević with my analysis of his album Panta. Now, there's a chance that you don't know what I'm talking about. You see, this channel, I'm very happy to say, has doubled in size since last year when I did my last video on Balašević. And it's interesting, because this whole series is actually part of why the channel grew. The first video I ever did that got more than 1,000 views was the first segment of this all the way back 5 years ago. So let me give a little introduction as to what this is. What is this series? Who is George Balašević, in case you are an American watching this? So, I'm married to a Yugoslavian, somebody who was born in the country of Yugoslavia, in a part that is now called Serbia. And as I got to know my then girlfriend, future wife, I came to realize that, this stuff is good, having a dictionary that can help you understand the words. But there's a cultural aspect that you really need to understand whenever you come to love somebody. And what became clear to me was to love my wife was to also love George Balašević, the singer from Yugoslavia, from the part of Yugoslavia that is now called Serbia, from the part of Serbia that is still called Vojvodina, that this kind of connection to her, I needed to understand him to understand her. So this whole series is just basically a love letter. I do it on her birthday every year, a day which I have declared Balašević Day in America. That's December 27th, so happy Balašević Day to all my Americans. And I just want to share this with you. My audience is perhaps Serbs and Croats and Montenegrins and anybody who loves Balašević's music, curious to see what an outsider thinks, but also maybe you're married to somebody from Yugoslavia, or maybe you're friends with somebody and they've tried to explain this musician to you and you just don't get it. Well, here I am to explain him to you. Now, this is going to be a shorter video than usual. Now, there's some 3 good reasons for that. Number 1 reason is I have a newborn, or we have a newborn. I have my baby monitor here. I'm checking. I might need to go up. I might need to pause this video and go get her because she appears to be stirring and moving around. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pause and make sure that my wife does not need me to stop this video and go take care of the baby. I'll be right back. Okay, everything's fine. She just needed a change, and now the baby's eating. Anyway, so I don't want to take too much time to do this video, because every time I do a video, that's time I have to block out, and I can't help her with our 2-year-old and our 3-month-old, okay? Another reason why this is not going to be the longest analysis of Balašević is this is a rough period in his music. It is generally accepted that this is not as good as many of his later albums or many of his earlier albums, and from what I can tell from the few people I've spoken to and the online chatter, this is not a loved Balašević album. And I'm actually going to be trying to answer the question why, because frankly, the difference between this and his other albums is not that great to me as an outsider. So I'm going to put forth some, guesses. And then the third reason is the saddest reason. And that is that it's not the right time for this album. So if you don't know, I'm going to go on a little tangent here. But as we are speaking now in December 2024, there have been massive protests in the country of Serbia. And it's a tough time because my wife, normally I listen to the Balašević albums for a month and a half before I review them. I talk about them with my wife. But it's hard for her to even think about Serbia right now because of what's happening. So we're in this very strange moment of hope and fear. So there are these very real protests by students. And there's the fear that these protests will lead to nothing. And if you're an American and you're thinking about this most recent election of re-election of Donald Trump, it is actually a pretty good case study for what happens when you elect a demagogue, okay? That's just a description, by the way. That's not a judgment. Demagogues exist. There's a definition for what they are, and Trump fits that definition, okay? All right. So when you allow a demagogue to take power, and you allow them to corrupt and undermine the systems that are put in place to check their power, things end up happening. It ends up really destroying a country from the inside. The example that fascinates me in Serbia is and correct me in the comments, all you Serbs who can define this better than I can, but if you want to keep a job, like as a teacher, say, you have to say that you are a part of the ruling party's power. Like, you have to say you are in their party. And if you don't, then your contract is not renewed. You literally have to vote for the president or else you lose your job. Okay? So anyways, this has been happening. It's been a very, very tricky time. One of the ways that the government officials tend to skim money is they have projects that don't need to be done. They just have public works projects that don't need to be done. This happened in Novi Sad, the city where Balašević is from. They redid this beautiful brutalist railroad station, and if you listen to Balašević's music, a lot of it takes place like on railroad stations. That's the station he would take to get to all these places that we listen to. And they redid the train station needlessly for no reason. They messed it up. 15 people died. And this was just the spark. This was the spark. There was a protest of over 100,000 people just in Belgrade, even though the president shut down the train system. Okay? It is a very, very hopeful moment where maybe there will be some meaningful political change, because we have students aligned with farmers, okay? That's like the 1968 magic, okay? And so we don't know. It's a sad time. It's a hard time. And we need Balašević. We need somebody like him, somebody who's wise, who's compassionate, but also who takes a stand and who fights for what's right. And he's not here. I mean, his music is here. Apparently one of the unofficial anthems of this whole protest is Ne lomite mi baranje, which I discussed, which was on his last album. This would be a perfect year to discuss the album Bezdan, but that was last year. And it's interesting and perhaps ironic, because I didn't like that song, because the way I read it is that it's sort of an unofficial nationalist anthem. And that's very much against his spirit. He was not pro-nationalist, but that song itself can be seen that way. But it's not about that. And that's what you helped me to understand in the comments. That's what frequent commentator and helper on this channel, Miloš Spasojević, told me, is that the song is not about the specific incidents, but it's about people who struggle and are oppressed due to the higher interest of someone more powerful. It is about helpless people and their plight. So we do have, or they have, to some extent, Balašević, but still, he's not here with us. He's not here to talk. He's not here to say what he should say. He's not here to be that voice. He died, and it's really, really sad. And so this album, Panta, is just not the album of the moment, because it's fascinating, because it's really, it's basically a concept album about the dissolution of Yugoslavia. A couple of years before Yugoslavia, the wars would even start. It was recorded and released in 1988. So, 7-8 years after the death of the person who held Yugoslavia together, Tito, who was the benevolent dictator, I guess we could say, as much as you can be a benevolent dictator. And then we had a sort of period of time of things fraying at the edges, and this mega state of many different countries that was once together was falling apart. And so this album is about that. And what we're living through right now, or what's being lived through right now in Serbia, is, in some extent, a continuation of the troubles that were experienced in the 80s and the 90s. And this album, its position is resignation. Its position is not fight, 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 because he's a kind of a contradiction. He's, on one hand, he's a revolutionary voice who fights for what's right, and on the other hand, he's like a wise old tree. He's like Yoda sitting in Dagobah, just not getting involved. He's just a hermit on the side of the mountain who is just wisely watching the rivers go by. That's who he is as well. And this is not the time for that. This is the time for fighting against people who are trying to break our locust tree. Still, there's something really bold about even describing this moment. And my theory is, why is this album not loved? It's because I think it's a very good description of how it happens. Like how it fell apart. And even with this distance, this despairing resignation, the album it's really sad because it has this resignation of the past and a knowing that the near future will be terrible. But underneath all of it is this long-term outlook that everything will be fine, that everything passes. And that's why I think we need to think about this sort of impartial or impotent view of history. It's defined by the two words that truly describe this album. And I'm going to say them. Sorry, I just got a text from my wife. I need to make sure that she doesn't need me to go get her. 1 second, I need to pause. Okay, I now have an off-screen co-host down here. I've got our little baby in a little rocking chair, and I'm rocking her with my right foot. So if you hear some noises that sound like a cute little baby, that's what that sound is. Where was I? I was talking about how to summarize this entire album with 2 words. And I'm going to teach you some Serbian. I'm going to teach you some Serbo-Croatian in the event that you don't speak any. Sve teče, which means everything flows. That is the theme of this album, which again might be at odds with a time in which people are actually trying to make meaningful change. Sve teče. Do you know how I know that's the message of this album? Because that's the title of this album in Latin, Panta. I'll tell you a little story in the event that you don't know. But the education system in Serbia is really good, especially compared to the education system in America. I think the American education system allows for more individual brilliance, but also it is not as good at having a general level of education that is super high. So my wife was like, oh, that's right. You didn't take Latin in high school, because she took Latin and she took French and she took English and she took philosophy and she took, advanced calculus and all that kind of crazy stuff, right? So Panta means everything flows. And it's this kind of philosophical position that was quoted by Diogenes and attributed to Heraclitus. So I think that's the position that Balašević is taking here. Sorry, I have my baby monitor for the 2-year-old, making sure she's okay. Yeah, she's okay. She's making a little bit of noise. But I can't have 2 babies here. Heraclitus is famous because he was sort of a contradictory figure. On the one hand, he talked about the permanence of everything with his description of the logos, but what he's most famous for is this idea, Panta. Everything changes. Everything changes. Everything changes all the time. Socrates said of Heraclitus, I like what I understand of him, and I imagine that I also like what I don't understand. So what Heraclitus talked about is that all things come into being by a conflict of opposites, and everything flows like a stream. So he was also famous for saying that we never step into the same river twice, that everything is change all the time. So this is important for a couple reasons. One, because water is a key theme to this album. This album is largely about water and the role that water plays in the dissolution of Yugoslavia. It's true. I'll get to it in a second. And also just this idea that everything flows, that the river flows, and the river doesn't care who the president is. The river doesn't care about poverty. The river doesn't care about injustice. It just keeps flowing, and it's never, ever the same. I mean, really, let's look at this album cover and really focus on it, because it says everything. Now, it's a hard one to read, but, these are rivers, right? But look at how they're actually uniting at the end. So the question is, how do we read this album cover? I read it like this, that this is Yugoslavia, and that this is it falling apart. And it's still flowing, but this shows the dissolution. This shows how everything may flow, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to change and break apart. Musically, this is maybe his most cohesive album. So one thing, if you've noticed, this is the 6th or 7th album of his I've talked about. he tends to do kind of a grab bag of different styles, and he does what appears to be almost like satire of different styles. You know, like he'll have his 50s song, and he'll have a song where he'll sing like this, and that's not here. Like, really, it seems as though he's hit a kind of mature style, which to my ears is very soft rock. There's a couple things that I have a hard time listening to that I have to get used to by listening to this music, like chimes and fretless bass. And what happens... Yeah, I'm talking about Balašević. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's your mama's favorite singer. Yeah. I've come to love this album the same way that I love all of Balašević's music, which means the first time I listen to it, I'm like, it's okay, I guess. And then over time, I get used to it. But maybe you are a Serb or a Croat or a Slav who's watching this and doesn't like this album. I will tell you the way to really come to enjoy this album is to see one performance of it at the Sava Centar in Belgrade in 1989. You can find it on Balašević's original YouTube channel, his actual YouTube channel. And there, I think it really comes to life. Because my issue is, I'm not sold on Petrović as a producer. I really like Josip Bošek, and I think maybe his production choices tend to be a little too much. But seeing him perform them live and emote through them, I think you will come to love the album if you just watch that concert. And there's one thing I know about a Balašević fan. You never have to ask them twice to watch him perform. to watch his concert videos. My wife will do anything to watch a Balašević concert video. So it's a party. It's a party album. It's a funeral. It's a party and it's a funeral. It's the soundtrack of Yugoslavia falling apart. That's what this is. And it starts off with a party. And it ends with a requiem. And in the middle is a mixture of personal and political songs. I think the reason this album is not loved is that it is perhaps the saddest album, at least that I've heard of his, but it also doesn't feel like a sad album. It's kind of a hidden, a secret sad album. So, let's get into it with the first track, Soliter. A super light, islandy kind of song. It's kind of jokey, all this percussion. It ends with him saying, Nya. I don't know if y'all have the Three Stooges in Yugoslavia. I've never asked my wife that. I should ask her that. Yeah, the Three Stooges. It's basically like the way the song is made. It's like Balašević cannot get the words out. He's just rushing through these verses, and he's trying to get to this chorus, and the chorus is the point of the song where he talks about Yugoslavia as a soliter, which means skyscraper. Our skyscraper is a merry mansion. The crowd is shaking it constantly. It's been taken down to the ground, but it was conceived monumentally. It's talking about the way that the facade is holding up, but the foundations are shaky. It is a wildly deep way of describing the death of Yugoslavia and where it was in the middle to late 80s. It is such a beautifully conceived of metaphor. It is so well executed, and it's a party. And that's the whole point of the song. The song is the facade. It's a fun party song. It's a facade, but underneath that facade, it is as sad as Requiem. It is a song about the coming civil war and the death and the streets and the exiles and the pain and the brothers killing brothers, okay? And that's what this song is underneath. But the facade is a merry mansion. And let me tell you, that kind of dissonance, that kind of artistic brilliance to do something so happy and so sad at the same time, I don't blame you. It's a very unpleasant thing to hear something so happy that is so unbelievably sad, which is why it's important. It's the first song because the last song is going to be appropriately sad about the Requiem for Tito and therefore the Requiem for Yugoslavia. But first we have to get through some other stuff, like Neki se rode kraj vode. Was my pronunciation good? No. Yeah, I've done better pronunciation. Some are born by the water. Super kind of 80s drum machine, canned horns. This is, again, the live version's much more enjoyable. It's kind of Peter Gabriel-like. I think maybe that's his big influence on this album. It builds up beautifully with some great funk guitar into the first verse. And we have this whole theme. And what's crazy is this initial theme is very much about post-Yugoslavia. It's about the weird injustices. Yeah. Yeah. It's about the injustices of the whole country, because Yugoslavia has many places with beautiful coasts, places like Montenegro, places like Croatia. And this whole song is about people who live there are so lucky to be born near water because all they have to do is just have a piece of property that maybe their grandparents gave them, and they can live comfortably and make money just by renting it out to people who don't have it. It is about the haves and the have-nots, but it's in a very specific Yugoslavian context. And what's wild is that this was when it was still possible just to drive to Croatia or just to drive to Montenegro without going through a border patrol. I've been on the border between Croatia and Serbia. It's not fun. It takes a long time. It's a very unpleasant border. And it didn't used to be there. If you wanted to get to the sea and you were from the part of Yugoslavia called Serbia, it was open. And here we have this bitterness. The bitterness of Serbia, which is, if you don't know, landlocked. The landlocked Serbians who are stuck here, and there are some people who get to live by the water. Quote, some are born by near blue water, and life imposes a cruel rhythm on them. From heaven everything in a metallic BMW and those thin Italian shoes, si pelle, that are easy to step on. It's all about this joke, which we'll come into later with the next song as well, where these people are in trouble and are having difficulty, but the difficulty is that everything is so good and that everything was just given to them. It talks about how they have ghetto tents for other Slavs, but for Germans or for Americans, they have the best possible accommodations. It is a very bitter, upset song that makes more sense now than it did when it was made then, because it seems to be foretelling the time where the ability for people in the part of Yugoslavia that is known as Serbia to get to water is very difficult. It is not easy. It is a landlocked country that does have a navy, by the way. But beneath it is real bitterness and sadness. And he talks about how he was born by an irrigation canal, and that's where he is. My wife told me some whole extended story about how her mom lived near an irrigation canal, and her grandmother would always get mad at her for going swimming in the irrigation canal because it was so dirty, but the kids would do it anyways. You know, that was the reality for people from that part of Yugoslavia. For other people, they would get to be just on the Mediterranean. The next song is Oni, which means they. This is my favorite song. My wife was like, how is this your favorite song? And I said, have you seen the version live at Sava Centar? And it's really funny because she constantly is telling me, one second, I think I need to pick up the baby, one second. She's constantly telling me that I have to watch his concerts, and I finally understand why. You know, the song itself is sort of like, I don't know, Ghostbusters meets What's the Difference by Dr. Dre. I don't know. There's something very kind of, and this is before West Coast gangster rap would become popular, but it has that kind of feeling to it. I don't know. And it's more like of a singing song. There's singing on the chorus. It's kind of like a disco chorus. Beautiful guitar sounds and violins in the left. I don't know. It's a beautiful song on album, but it really comes alive when you see it performed, the dude playing piano and the real horns. And it has my favorite part of the album, which is this little funky breakdown where he says, "Obordi," which means get down. Whoa. Oh, oh. There's all this singing of oh, and then opet. Now, every once in a while, you see, not only do I have a baby literally on my lap right now while I'm doing this, but I also have my baby monitor for the two-year-old, and the 2-year-old loves this song, and whenever we listen to this album, as we have been, she has timed it perfectly. But it went dun, 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 oh, and she jumps in, and she says in perfect Serbian, Opet. And we just run around the whole house saying Opet, which means again, one more time, Opet. Now again, this is a bitter song. It's interesting because it's ironic, right? It is literally an ironic song, meaning he's saying the opposite of what he means. Just like he said in the previous song, he talks about the people who are born by the water and who are cursed to have BMWs and nice shoes. Here, he's talking about people who are in high positions of power in the Yugoslavian government, the drugovi, which means like comrades, but actually is a term which my wife explained to me implies a level of high functionaries, like the rich people in a communist state, that all the things they have to suffer through. They have to suffer through living in embassies, they have to suffer through going on hunting trips and having to avoid the bloodthirsty doe who they're hunting. It's basically like an ironic version of the song Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And again, it's a very bitter song, but it's interesting because it's a bitter song about the power structure that exists currently. So it's actually against the communist government, which was sort of, not communist, Jesus, against the socialistic government that was running. Sorry, I throw these words. Americans are very bad with the difference between socialism and communism and all of its different forms, so I apologize to all my comrades for misusing these terms. I have a new light, by the way. My wife, she got me a new setup, so I hope this light works good. I feel like I look like a ghost, but what do I know? The next song is called Šansona, which means song in French. This is the only new music review show hosted by a French professor, so I am a French professor, so I like hearing the word chanson. And what I like about this is that it seems like all the way throughout all of his music, he's constantly trying to figure out, is he a chanson singer in the model of Aznavour or what are the Aznavour? You know, is he like that, or is he a Schlager singer, which is a thing he often calls himself, which is a kind of lower class singer. They both are like words that mean songs or music, but one of them implies kind of low class or bad taste. That's the Schlager. So I like that he's calling himself a chanson singer here, because that implies at least some level of taking himself seriously, even if the song itself has this kind of farting tuba playing these notes and a drummer with a brush. His voice is a little bit more personal here. It builds with this accordion in the second verse. It's really, really nice. There's like some mandolin in the left. Now the words here are clearly very, very essential, but what he's actually saying is a little bit unclear. They're chasing me like I'm the devil, and there's the fewer and fewer people who really like me. My wife was singing along to this song, and then I asked her, what is this song about? And she's like, I've never thought about it. So it turns out it's really about being an artist. It's a very actually personal song that is about how every single stupid thought he has, every single stupid thought that he has to sing. And that eventually what he sings comes true. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting idea. He like sees himself almost like a wizard. Yeah, and then the baby's favorite part of the album, and my favorite part of the whole album, is the little instrumental bit in this song, which is just this nice little quiet moment with these very organic instruments. And maybe my biggest problem with the whole album is just the instrumentation at times just feels a little too synthesized or a little too inauthentic. Leading to the next song, Nemam, ništa s tim. I have nothing to do with it. This is just So this is the thing. In a previous Balašević album, I would get the sense that this song would be a little bit over the top and just like an imitation of a blues song. This is just a straight-up blues song, but it's really well made. My wife was like, I know you hate this song. I know you hate this song. I'm like, no. Don't you hate the guitar solo? I don't hate the guitar solo. It's a nice Stratocaster guitar. It's very solid. It's a very well-played solo. And then this is where the album, I think, gets really interesting, because it's a typical Balašević style love song that's very bittersweet, right? He's the king of the bittersweet. Nobody can sing about bittersweet in English and French and German, any language, better than Balašević can. And it's about this love relationship he had. And often in his love relationships, he's totally out of his element. He's completely just blown away by the beauty and fascination by the beauty and mystery of the women that he's with. And that's who this person is here. She used to like the blues. Her king was named Peter Green, Fleetwood Mac. He's always talked about some British singer somewhere. And I was there by mere accident, completely alien to the scene. She'd always look at her watch, and as soon as the hands met like a kid, she'd whisper that someone's talking about me. And this is what's fascinating, we'll spit up 1 second. What I think makes this so interesting is that, as often happens with the Balašević song about love, the relationship ended. He's having this very wise perspective on that relationship. And what he says here is, anyway, all things will pass, but what is left is the blues. So this is taking the national, the universal themes of this album, that everything will pass, and making it personal about this love relationship. So I think this is a very intentional thing in which we have the passing of Yugoslavia essentially mirrored by the passing of this relationship and the greatness of this relationship that he is mourning. He's also mourning with a fair amount of distance and acceptance. And again, maybe that's why this album is hard to listen to, because it feels maybe a little bit like he is accepting the dissolution of Yugoslavia. As the colors all dissolve, when it comes on the radio, the metronome murders me. What's that clock doing here? It's 1:05. Someone is thinking of her. I love the little details that he's putting forth, that she's a big fan of the Czech writer who is kicked out of his country and has a box of his books in her bedroom. Must be talking about Miloš Kundera, who's, the smut for intellectuals. Like if you ever meet somebody and they say they really love Miloš Kundera, they're probably, yeah. She's trying to stop me from saying anything else. I don't blame you. Talks about an ugly French actor who's doing a lot of driving. I assume that he's talking about Jean-Paul Belmondo from Breathless. I think that would kind of meet the sort of themes of this album, the kind of mysterious, fleeting love relationship that's in that album, although Jean-Paul Belmondo was not ugly, but I don't know. Coming up next is Starim. This is my issue, though. It's a badly sequenced album. So this is the beginning of side B. Side B should have ended with Starim. It needs to end with this kind of more wistful, more universal tone. It's kind of messed up. At the end of most side A's of Balašević albums, we have a kind of grand song that can be sort of representing himself and also us. Starim is the perfect last song on a Balašević side, and for some reason it's not. It's about getting older. It's got this fretless bass and the sultry synthesizer. The saxophone is almost like Wham's Careless Whisper. But this is a great song. I mean, maybe the other reason why people don't love this album is, he doesn't really let go with his voice on this album. He's so great at having his voice do fantastic, dynamic things. This album does not have that, save for this song, where he gets, he goes all up high, and it's this really great, bittersweet song on aging. The new day is only a trick to make the old one disappear. Wow, and you hear him express this wisdom and talking about the morning finds me alone like the shell in the sand. And he's talking about how old he is and how he forgets names and only faces remain. In passing, I detect people through codes. I'm getting old. I forget boring numbers. He's just getting so old. And you watch the video and you can tell how old and wise he is. He's 36 years old. He's 9 years younger than I am right now. But somehow he has this kind of perspective on the world, this kind of deep wisdom and world weariness. It's very funny. It's very funny. that he is, that he has this perspective in this time. For the most part, this video was done without input from my wife, because again, like, I don't want to make her sad by thinking too much about Serbia right now when she's not already thinking, she's thinking about it all the time anyway. So anyways, she says this song might be the most intimate song that she knows of by Balašević, because it's about his creative process and perhaps about his mental health, his inability to ever slow down. Okay, I now have to do something with this baby that is not this. 1 second. With the next song, I Don't Know What You Want. What do you want, Balašević fans? Are you sure this isn't a great album? Are you sure? Čekajući Montenegro Express. Waiting for the Montenegro Express. This is everything you want in a Balašević song. Cinematic, these low winds and the chimes and the cymbals, and it builds into a jaunty rhythm that sounds like a train. His voice is more forward, it's a little bit less bombastic. I figured out a way to love this song, okay? If you don't love this song the way it's recorded, I don't know of a live version, a good live version on YouTube, but I did find a cover band by some cover band called, and this is this is me reading Cyrillic, so let's see if I say it properly. I believe the name of the band, are you ready for me to read Cyrillic? Is Ne Normali Balašević Band. And I will include a link to that in the description. It's just this great, charming feeling, and it's all about this love story, about going to Montenegro with a lover and looking up at the clouds, and the stories are told and nothing is to be added. There's so much water on this album, so much water. He talks about Bregovi, which is the name of a river, but also, is this a reference to Bregović, the guy from all the Kundera, not the Kundera, all the director's movies and the big singer that my wife always talks about, and she seems to simultaneously love Bregović and hate Bregović at the same time. Is that like a common thing? I don't know. Yeah, did I forget the name of the director of Dolly Bell? I did. It's going to come to me soon, don't worry. Yeah. It might not, though. Yeah. Okay. And so on the one hand, it's this... Oh, wait, now I hear noise upstairs. On the one hand, it's this happy love song, but on the other, we have to remember the context. Because going to Montenegro is easy and fine. He can go from the Novi Sad train station, and I think with a couple exchanges, probably in Belgrade, he can make his way to Montenegro. But this is that anger. This is some people are born by the water. He has to go to this place. I think it's all tied in. Two clouds like snowballs being silly above the Budva while we are waiting for the Montenegro Express. The next song is the song that everybody apparently waits for. I've described Balašević albums as packing peanuts with a ballad in the middle that basically what most people love is just the ballads. I'm not a Slav, so when I listen to Balašević, I hear the whole thing. I like his ballads, but they're not a part of my fabric of my existence. But this is the big song. Once upon a time, they planted a linden tree. If you are married to a South Slav, you need to understand these people love linden trees. They have a relationship to linden trees that you and I cannot understand. It is like very important. Now the last album had the locust trees. This one, locust trees, baranje. This one has the linden trees, lipu, right? Lipe? Lipi? Yeah. Am I trying to talk Srpska? Yeah, I am. But it's a very important thing, and it's a nice reminder of the pastoral nature of Balašević's music, of where he's from in northern Serbia, and how connected it is to nature. And it's a wistful ballad with that damn fretless bass, and the whole thing is just about being a kid and remembering when the what was that noise? There's just too much stuff going on here. Is she now getting up my toddler? What was the point of me doing all this work if she's just going to go and wake up the toddler? She is. Okay, I'll be back. There's just too much going on here. Happy birthday, love. Anyways, it's all about, like, knowing these old people who planted the linden tree, knowing they would never enjoy the shade. I love the chorus that's introduced by Hey, a gorgeous break with string and drums, and it leads into this epic chorus. And what's interesting is I think the woman from Nemam, ništa is in this song. Once upon a time, she passed me by with a guy who I have known. I was ready to say hello, but she turned her head in time for me to feel the blues in my head because she loved the blues. We said a stupid hi and nodded heads. Once again, we are in the realm of the personal, of all these things passing, and of Yugoslavia dissolving, and everything being okay because Panta Re, everything will fall. And I think that's the beauty of this song and the beauty of this album, that we are in this weird paradox of understanding that everything will be okay in a time where things were very much not okay. Which leads to the final track, Requiem, which has the violin and the keyboard-style harpsichord. It's the heaviest song. And this is my question to you. How is this song not his most famous song? So, how is this album not more popular? I think it's because this is the best song on the album, and it's about the death of Tito, and I don't think that Slavs are over the death of Tito, and I don't blame them. And I think that this song is so powerful and so good, but it's too hard, I think. And the lyrics are so meaningful because he's talking about the whenever I walk the street with your name, I think of that song. I've been singing it for years. And so much of the chorus is about the old national anthem of Yugoslavia, Hey Slavs, the song of unity and togetherness, and him recognizing that it's over. I know, it's a bummer that it's over. It's a bummer. Yeah. Where all your grandparents are, all that stuff. It's a tough place. Yeah. And then we even get to why the war happened. He describes what happened in people's heads. The story will remain in books. Balkans, at the end of one century, every tribe draws their own border. Everyone would want their own page. That's what happens. That's what actually happens, is everybody wanted their own border and their own part of the page. Yeah. Some neck strength there. And what's interesting is I was talking to my wife about this last night before going to bed. And she said that it's not really fair to say that this album is against revolutionary feelings, but that it's more proper to say that it's about his isolation and his love of Yugoslavia, because he says, all I have is Yugoslavia, and he's describing how there's all these barricades being drawn and all these people waving flags, and that essentially Yugoslavia has left him, that he's still in Yugoslavia, but Yugoslavia has left him. And it's about that resignation and that powerlessness. But I don't think it's actually accepting it. It's just describing it. It's a requiem. Bless you. It's a requiem. Bless you. It's not that cold here. It's a requiem for Yugoslavia more than it is for Tito. And how is this song not considered one of Balašević's greatest songs? Because we have this whole harpsichord and chamber music quartet here, and this nice quiet moment which just keeps going with these strings, and then his voice comes back, and it sounds like a music box. It sounds like a lullaby. It closes out with his final words, the final words of the album. And when I walk the street with your name, I think of Panta Re. Because again, everybody in Serbia has studied Latin. Everybody in Serbia has studied Heraclitus, and they understand this theory. I think of Panta Re. Some guy out there will throw a rock on your monument too. That this figure who's so well revered and so well loved, are you hungry? Will end up, I think she's hungry, will end up having a rock thrown. And the album ends with the most meaningful words of the album. Because everything changes and everything flows. Sve teče. And then he says, Čovek. He says man. So he's been calling him Comandante the whole video. You know, he's considered to be a marshal. He's considered to be a comrade. He's considered to be a commander. But at the end of this, he's just a man. He's just a bro, a dude. He's, in the end, everything flows, man. That's how we can think of this ending. And it's that resignation. Oh yeah, she's hungry. I'm gonna have to bring her up to you right now. And it ends on that theme. So we'll see. Apparently the next album is like a really good album. This is where Balašević is going to get really good again. And I think he's pretty great with this one already. Some Patreons. I don't have enough arms to show up my Patreon sheet. You'll have to understand me. Miloš Spasojević, Vukivić, Tiverga, Rogan Joshua, and Maya Weberin all wanted shout-outs. Thank you to my Patreons. Thank you to everyone who watches these videos and watches me try to understand this really important part of my family's history. Because this man here is part of the reason why this girl here is here. Yeah. Okay. She needs to eat. All right. Until next time, thank you for bearing with me. Was this an exciting video for you to watch as it was for me to make? I hope not. All right. There's the camera.